Welcome to the What on Earth Are You Doing After 50 radio show, featuring your host, Gwendolyn Ware-Swint, CEO and founder of Senior Health Matters, certified life strategist to the baby boomers, and #1 international best-selling author. Gwen is all about life after 50, arriving in tip-top health to go on to the next career. Gwen's guests will inspire you to eat healthier, live more energetically, and support you to ramp up your second half of life. And now, here's your host, Gwendolyn Ware-Swint.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm your host, Gwendolyn Ware-Swint. This is my first show. And I'm very happy to have all of you listening in. The name of the show is What on Earth Are You Doing After 50? Good question, right? Well, today I have my first guest, who is Debra K. Adams. Debra is a business owner. She's an international expert on education, prevention of domestic violence, and all forms of violence against women. Debra's business is working with people who self-identify as a victim, survivor, or thriver of any form of violence. This has happened in Debra's life, so she knows what she's talking about firsthand. Debra self-identifies as a survivor. Good for you, Debra.
Well, thank you. Good morning.
Yes. Debra, would you like to elaborate on what I've just said? I have a little more to say here, but I want you to just jump right in and tell us about your business.
Okay. Well, I have a little tagline, and my tagline is, I have lived it, excuse me, I have survived, I have worked it, and I have studied it. And the it is the domestic violence that you spoke of, Gwendolyn. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not letting that experience of domestic violence completely define me, but it has changed my life in a way I had no idea it would happen. And once I was free of that violent relationship, I realized that I could make my own decisions. I could take risks when necessary and be completely in charge of my life. And so that has been the fantastic outcome of that portion of my life.
Yes. I resonate so well with what you're saying, Debra, and it's just amazing that you're my first guest, because I also suffered from domestic abuse, so I'm with you here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, anytime I speak, someone always comes up to me after I'm done and says, you know what? I get it. I know from my personal experience what you just talked about. Mm-hmm. And for me, that is very rewarding.
Yes.
Because I lived in silence for 17 years. I don't know how long your relationship was, but I was married to my 4 children's father for 17 years. Mm-hmm. And getting over the fear of talking about it certainly released a lot of the wild woman in me. I have to say that.
Good thing.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I hear you on that. In fact, that is what my chapter is about in the book Bold is Beautiful, about the domestic violence, some parts of it. I spent 14 years in a relationship, as almost as long as you did.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, so you took a risk.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I took a risk, and I would say that leaving that abusive relationship was the single most biggest risk I've taken so far in my life. Plus, I would say, I mean, it has had a really long-term, meaningful impact on my life, but in a positive way, which people don't necessarily think can happen after you've lived through abuse for so long. So, yes, I learned to take the risk because it became more important to me about the care and safety of my 4 children. That was what first motivated me to take that risk.
Right. The children.
It wasn't until I could see how they were being impacted by observing their father's and mine relationship. And once I made that connection, that even though he wasn't abusing them per se physically, when I saw that impact on them, I just like snapped right out of it. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter that I don't have a job because I wasn't working. It doesn't matter that I live in a house with a payment. At that time, it was $1,000 a month, which is a really high house payment.
Yes.
And together we only had one vehicle, and I knew he would be taking it. So, but once that realization hit me that I needed to do this to protect my kids, the risk was worth it to me.
Yes. I can definitely understand that, and I can see where the you could see that it would be mentally abusing the children, if not physically.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing that, people don't, I mean, when I go out and speak now about domestic violence, very often people in the audience are like, I didn't know that verbal and emotional abuse were part of domestic violence.
Yes.
I didn't know that control and, threats and intimidation happen so often. That's because people don't see that, right? It happens behind closed doors.
Exactly. And it's invisible.
It is invisible. And it ends up making me or you or whoever's living that feel invisible too. Do you agree with that, Gwendolyn?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So for the past 20 years, I took that very frightening, very life-changing risk and ran with it. And once I found a job where I felt like I could support myself and my children, we had health care, and we could pay the rent and the utilities and put food on the table. Once those things were accomplished, then I started to look inward to see, I think something might have been broken inside of me, or something was wrong with me, so I started working on me, and that has become a lifelong journey as well.
Yes.
I'm a big project.
Yes, it is. And the realization, once you have that realization, then you've got it going on. That is a real catalyst. When you realize something, then everything seems to just fall into place.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. And again, people don't realize how much work it takes. And I guess what I would be sharing with our listeners this morning, because it's Friday morning, really early in my side of the United States, it's 7 a.m. Okay. So this is unusual coffee break talk, right? But I would say that people don't see what they don't want to see. And if we put our minds to it and we follow that up with our heart and our spirit, then we can start seeing those things. And I believe that if the experience of domestic violence hasn't happened to you personally, that you know someone it has happened to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I always like to say, don't be afraid of that, but also to be aware of that kind of roller coaster ride of emotions you go on. because in one day I could have experienced every single emotion possible for a human being, right? I could start out in a really good mood and be high, and then get a call from the ex, and then go way down, and then, maybe my workplace kind of pumps me back up, and then I might get a call from my kids, one of them sick or something. You just go through this really roller coaster experience, and it's really hard to kind of regulate our fight or flight reaction because we've been using that for so long while living within the violent relationship. Right. How do we kind of turn the volume down on that part and get to a place where we're more even, where we feel like we have more control over our own existence and things that are going on around us?
Debra, I notice you consider yourself a survivor and not a victim.
Right.
Yeah. Would you like to?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Number one, victim to me is a legal term, or involves the criminal system and justice system. And I never once identified as a victim of that sort of system. We, in our 17 years of marriage, we never once would call the police, and none of our neighbors or people around us called the police. So we really had no interaction with anybody outside of his dysfunctional family and our, close neighbors. But so I don't necessarily think a lot of us would name ourselves as victim.
Right.
I thought I was in a really, really bad marriage. And I want people to realize that at that time, he was telling me it was my fault. That it was my behavior that made him hurt me.
Right.
Right?
Yes, that's generally the case, isn't it?
It so is. And after a while, you do start believing that, and you start thinking that it's within your control, and that you do everything possible to appease or to prevent that violent reaction, whatever it is. But the truth of the matter is, I learned after separation and living in some peace and quiet that I'm only responsible for my reactions. I'm not responsible for other people's reactions.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter what I do or say. It never gives someone else the right to hurt me. And that was a huge step for me to realize that fact.
Yes.
Just because of that whole verbal and emotional campaign of 17 years, which was telling me I was less than, I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't a good enough mother, no one else would love me, all those types of conversations that he had with me. So it takes a lot of self-perseverance to work through all of those kinds of emotions and experiences. So it takes a little while. It takes a long time, right?
It's a lifetime.
It's a lifetime.
Yes, I think it is, which is a good thing, because once we finish working on those things, then we go on to something else that needs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I absolutely love the title of your radio show. What on earth are you doing after 50? Because so many people think life ends at 50, right?
Exactly. And it really just begins because you worked on yourself up until that age. So you know a little more about what you're doing, what you're getting into, and then you can really live life.
Absolutely.
A little help from your friends.
A little help from our friends. I love that too. Well, and just the fact that knowing you can make your own decisions is so powerful. And I actually remember this happened to me right at my 40th birthday, which was the big birthday after I separated from the kid's father. And I had absolutely the best birthday I'd ever had since I was a child.
Oh.
And I thought, well, this is how it can be, right?
Yes.
This is how life could be. And I have the power to take myself in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a life-changing moment for me, too.
Yes.
And after 40, it just got better and better.
Okay. How, Debra, at this point, how are you doing your strategies with the women that come to you?
Right. So my business is called Self-Empowerment Strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of evolved out of my 20 years work with thousands of survivors and victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, stalking, dating violence, and sex trafficking. And I was working for a nonprofit, community-based organization, and we provided shelter and advocacy and legal advocacy and all sorts of supports. And what I noticed was over that 20-year period is that the numbers didn't get smaller of people needing or asking for help or assistance. They stayed about the same. And so I kind of realized that the intervention piece I was doing, being so important and so impactful for people's life, but I wasn't affecting any change in the root of the problem. And so I started to see that I could share things that I had learned along the way with others, and they would share with me what they had learned. And I started saying, that's a really good strategy. Because another thing we talk about is coping with. And coping sometimes has a negative connotation to it as well. So I felt like strategies was a strong and powerful word, and it indicated a lot of choice for me. And then I noticed when I was using those strategies that I felt more empowered. And so I realized empowerment comes from within me. No one can give empowerment to me. I can't give it to you, Gwen.
Right.
However, I can support people in any way I can so that they can return to their own strong sense of self and empowerment through sharing of strategies. And then I also learned that not every survivor of domestic violence reaches out to a nonprofit community-based program, doesn't reach out to their religious community, doesn't have a support system within their family structure. So I said, how can we work in a positive way to help people return to their inner strength, their sense of who they are and their gift to the world, and still overcome any type of violence they've experienced. So that's kind of how I came up with self-empowerment strategies. And it's just become a lifelong mission of me, for me, to share those with people. And so I came up with my own mission statement. And my personal mission statement is living free of violence with joy and out loud.
Okay, out loud. I like that.
Yeah, I came upon that as an exercise. I was working with a mentor, and they said, what do you want on your gravestone when you die? And they said, you have to make it short and sweet, and it has to be something you want people saying about you after you're gone. So that's how that kind of evolved. I want my kids and my grandkids, because I have 8 of them. I have 4 kids and 8 grandkids, to say she lived her life to the full. She lived free of violence and with joy, and she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. That's how I want people to remember.
Right. And I love the word joy. It's so different from being happy.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I used to sit and wonder when I was ever going to be happy.
Right.
And I thought, how who's going to make me happy? How am I going to get this happy? And then through those different strategies that I learned that I have the ability to make myself happy, and that created a sense of joy for me. So that's where that came from.
Right.
But, I think it's so important that we have mentors and people we can talk to about these things.
It is very important, Deborah. And on that note, how can someone get in touch with you if they would like to take advantage of the strategies that you have for them?
Yes, thanks for asking. I have websites. The first website I came up with is www.sisses.net. And so that's, to me, says Sis Says. And I've shortened self-empowerment strategies to SES, which is Says. It's a different way of saying it, but it's much shorter and a lot simpler. So SIS came from a networking group of other survivors that I came to love and trust. Mm-hmm. And we called ourselves, our group was Survivors in Service, because to every single one of us wanted to do something to prevent this from happening to another woman on Earth.
Yes.
Or other children on Earth, or other men on Earth. And so because we had that strong altruistic sense among us, we thought, well, we're survivors in service. We want to provide a service to others. And we started looking at ways of doing outreach and education. So we would hold events. Mm-hmm. We supported a survivor who was in jail for killing her abuser, who had just gotten out of jail and was attacking her. So it was completely self-defense. But they put her in jail and were going to charge her with murder one. So we did a whole political action in a very small rural community. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point that everybody in the courtroom knew who we were.
Yes, sir.
And it was really pretty amazing. So then we went on to public policy. We started wanting to, what about these laws, the criminal side, which, unfortunately has a lot of unintended consequences that the battered women's movement didn't necessarily know were going to happen. So we started looking at those things too. So, yeah, my website, I'm on Facebook. You can find me, my name, Debra K. Adams, M.A. The M.A. is for my graduate degree, and I actually decided to start including that when, because, believe it or not, there's several Debra K. Adams in the world.
Good, I got to put that on there.
Yes, you don't have to, but if you put it in there, you're pretty sure to find me on any social network site. And, of course, my email is also that. Debra K. Adams, M.A. @gmail.com. But I love to talk with people and share strategies and work together. I think that's really what it's all about for me at this stage in my life.
Yeah, very important service because, Deborah, I know you wouldn't be surprised, but I know a lot of people would be surprised at the women that suffer in silence.
Yes.
Because they don't know where to go. And plus they're embarrassed.
That's a huge thing too. Yeah, that embarrassment. The shame of being in a relationship.
Shame, right.
Someone who says they love you, but at the same time they're hurting you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that shame is huge for keeping us quiet. Mm-hmm. Especially when no one that we love and trust around us supports us. And I share this part of my story not to blame our friends and family, just to make them aware. I have an older brother who I lost contact with while I was in that abusive relationship, and after I divorced and was moving on, and my brother and I had a chance for a conversation, he said, you know what, I didn't like the way he was treating you. Mm-hmm. I knew that this is his point of view. I thought if I said something to you, you would then get mad at me and you would take his side. You would defend him. And so I thought it was best if I just stepped away and out of the because I couldn't watch him treat you that way. And my heart just sank because I thought, this is my older brother who I love and respect. And I said to him, I'm not blaming you because you're probably right. I probably would have reacted that way. Probably. But at the same time, for me to hear those words come from you, someone, a male who I love and trust, to say that he's not treating me equitably or nicely even, or rudely or whatever, it might have helped me come to the realization sooner. And I'm saying that not to make you feel bad, but just to point out that how important our friends and family are to us in helping us see that.
Right. It's such a sensitive issue because they just don't know what really is going on, and they don't want to get that deeply involved, although they do care. It's just,
they do care, and they want to help, but they don't know how, right?
Right. Yes, you're right. Well,
and they're afraid, like my brother, if I say something, then you'll get mad at me.
Right.
And I say, I understand that, I get that, but still, I'm telling you, having people I know and loved and trusted say to me, he's treating you badly, would have helped me. And but you can't know that, right, till hindsight.
Exactly.
2020, right? That's what hindsight is.
Right, exactly. Well, Debra, so I understand that you start a new career at age. Do you want to tell your age?
Absolutely. This year I turned 60.
Okay. Congratulations. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, thanks.
So, you took a risk at age 60. Do you want to tell the audience what that risk was? Debra would love to hear it.
Okay, so all my friends now call me the risk taker because I do that. But just last Wednesday, I quit my job, my day job, as we say, for all of us who have this kind of passion. I had a day job with a very steady, a reasonable salary. I had medical coverage. Mm-hmm. It was a nice, secure position to be in. However, I have been wanting to do the work I love 100% of the time. And some things were going on. There were shifts going on in the workload and the company that I worked with. So I just quit.
Wow.
I just said, okay, here's my keys, and I'm done working for you today.
Oh my goodness, I am so proud of you.
Yeah, it was a little scary, and I'd been thinking about it for a long time. But, the minute I did that and I walked out of the building, mm-hmm. I felt like a ton of bricks had fallen off my shoulders.
I know the feeling. Wow.
It was amazing.
Yes.
And I've had my friends say, oh, are you okay? Oh, my God, what are you going to do? And I'm like, you know what? I'm fine. In fact, I'm terrific.
All right.
I got plans.
You had plans. Okay. So, Debra, did you go right into your plans?
Well, I did. I kicked it into high pretty hard. I'm into the internet and social media and realizing the power of that. So mm-hmm. I just started reaching out to friends, and some opportunities immediately appeared for me. So I took advantage of those mm-hmm. in the hopes that by taking advantage of them for myself, I'm doing good things for others. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I can focus on my own business, self-empowerment strategies. Mm-hmm. In fact, in January, I was I'm part of an organization called National Women's Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation. And we work on all forms of violence. And in January, we went to California, in Pomona, California, and had a national conference on trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, all of it. And so I was totally rejuvenated by that experience. I got to work with other survivors of violence while I was there and met with, we call it multidiscipline people interested in preventing, intervening, and ending trafficking. So I got a chance to speak to that audience. And it was just so just rejuvenating and really filled my cup and reminded me of my passion to do this work. So, and another thing that's come up since I quit my job last week was I've been selected as the state director of Washington State for Unite Women.
Oh.
And they've invited me to be on their radio show on February 15th.
Okay.
And people can find out about that on my Facebook.
Okay.
But it's going to be from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, February 15th. And it's going to be a global conversation on human and sex trafficking. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, wonderful.
Please tune in and join in if you like.
Okay.
And so things, the universe has been providing for me, and that's kind of the way it's been in my life. Mm-hmm. When I was 45, I decided to return to college. And I went to my local community college. And at the same time, my youngest was finishing his high school education. So when he graduated in 1999, I said, let's go to college together. He was like, no. Let's not, Mom. However, I'm so proud to say that he got his bachelor's degree in 2003, and I got my bachelor's degree in 2003.
Is that right?
Yeah, we did go to different schools. But not many mother-son partners can say they did that together.
I love that so much. That's so much for what you can do in your 50s and 60s.
Absolutely, and it was fun, and it was reinvigorating, and I met so many fabulous people.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I felt like, whoa, I have not been living my life to its fullest, you know?
Right.
It was a really great piece. So I took a year off after I got my bachelor's. At that time, I thought I wanted to become an attorney, Gwen.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, so I had high aspirations, right? So I applied to 15 different law colleges. So I have a no thank you letter from Harvard Law School. I applied to them.
Hey, do your thing.
So at least I tried. That's what I can say is I tried, dang it.
Regrets.
I went for it.
No regrets. You went for it.
No regrets. So I went for it. I didn't get into any college, but this college in South Dakota, which I haven't shared with you, I'm originally from South Dakota, not that it matters, but I thought, well, this is kind of full circle. Mm-hmm. You know, this college, University of South Dakota in Vermilion, South Dakota, said, we have this summer course for people like you that have applied and haven't been accepted. You can come to this summer program. You'll take 2 classes in law classes, and at the end we'll do the final exam, and the top 10 scorers in your class will be offered a position in our school in the fall. Mm-hmm. So I jumped on that. I'd already turned in my resignation, or I had told all my supervisors I would be quitting to go to law school, right? Mm-hmm. So this popped up. I got the notice like on May 1st, and I had to be in Vermilion, South Dakota by May 30th. Mm-hmm. And so I quit my job. I packed up some stuff. I subletted an apartment in Vermilion, South Dakota, and I got on a Greyhound bus. 48 hours later, the bus pulls into this, it's 7 a.m. in the morning, pulls into this empty parking lot, a Papa John's taco stand, says, "Here you are," tosses me out of the bus with all my stuff for this class situation, and drives off. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done now? But I walked across the street, and against all of my domestic violence and violence against women training, I started up a conversation with a young man who was behind the counter, and I said, "Their cab system," and guess what? There's no cab system in Vermillion, South Dakota. I would have to call to the closest town was 50 miles away. They had one, but they would charge me for the 50 miles to come and get me and to my place in the 50 miles back. So I said, oh my God. So he says to me, very nice young man, he'll always be a hero to me, but he said, if you don't mind waiting a few minutes, I'm getting off shift. I know exactly where your sublet apartment is. I can take you there.
Isn't that something?
So he took me there, and so I did that. It was great fun. I had a young woman as a roommate and another young man as a roommate. Of course, I think I was the oldest person in the class.
Well, that's okay.
We studied together. We did all this stuff together. We lived through tornado warnings. What else happened while we were there? And we took the final, and only one of the three of us got in the top 10 scores. And I'm still friends with that beautiful young woman today, who did go on to become an attorney.
But see what happens when you step out of the box, step out of your comfort zone?
Yes. Everybody thought I was crazy. Are you kidding me? Do you even know where Vermillion, South Dakota is? Most people don't.
No.
It's in the southeast corner, about 15 miles from the Iowa border, and I think the Minnesota border, too. I mean, it's this incredibly small town. At its height, during the school year, there's like 10,000 people there. But during the summer, there's just not very many people there.
They leave and go home.
They do.
That's interesting.
It was a trip. It was a riot.
I love it. That's such a great example of stepping out of your comfort zone and doing what you want to do.
Yeah, I have to tell you, my youngest son, he's so sweet. He kept saying, "Mom, you're too old to be doing this stuff. You're just too old." And I'm like, well, wait a minute here. Let's wait and see how you feel when you're 45 or when you're 50. And you realize you don't want your life to be over.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Your life is not over at those ages, 40, 50, 60. And it's definitely not 70.
You know, wasn't there someone in her late 60s that just swam the English Canal, or was it the Florida one? I mean, she'd been practicing for years, and she finally did it, and I thought, you go, girl.
You see so much of that these days, and it's so good to see. I'm just so excited about that.
Me too.
Debra, would you like to tell us a little bit about your international best-selling book?
I most certainly would. I had the honor and the privilege of working with 26 other beautiful, wonderful, amazing soul sisters, and we put together a book named The Missing Piece, A Transformational Journey. And December 7th, it was released on Amazon.com, and by December 8th, it had achieved #1 best-selling book in 6 different categories. And we were just so elated, all of us. Yeah. And the purpose of that book, and it was a group of women, much like yourself and I, people who had experienced something, violence, trauma, medical disease, disorders, condition, loss of loved ones. And so we each of us wrote a chapter from the bottom of our hearts and souls and offered it to the world. And so that has been an amazing experience. And I know that you have done that in your book too. Tell about your book.
Well, yes. Actually, I've done two. Living Without Limitations, 30 Mentors to Rock Your World. I talk about the senior community in that book. And Bold is Beautiful. In that book, I talk about my personal transformations and, how I got to where I am now, that sort of thing. Along with 27 other amazing women and their stories, and the same thing in the Mentors book. But I want to talk about The Missing Piece. I have that book. I have not read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it, Debra. What's the name of your chapter?
My chapter is called The 5 A's to Authenticity.
Okay.
And the reason I chose my title was, excuse me, is because I actually have been in search of an authentic life this whole time since I separated from the ex. And I think there's a lot of people like me searching an authentic life.
Yes.
And living to our core beliefs. So first of all, you have to know what those are.
Right.
What your core values are.
Exactly.
And your very deep felt beliefs. And so that's what I talk about. There's 5 A's to authenticity. And living authentically is what my mission statement gets me to. I said living free of violence with joy and out loud. That gets me to living authentically.
Yes.
And when I pay attention to my body, my physical cues, and my health, including my health, and my emotional and intuitional spirits, then I can continue to live in authenticity. And when that is the case, I just feel so happy. I feel so alive. I feel so engaged, and relationships are what it's all about for me. So I love to meet people and get to know them, and as I've said before, share strategies. How did you get here? How'd you get there, man? You went through some stuff,
Yes. Well, I'm excited to read your chapter. In fact, I think that'll be on my to-do list for this evening.
Well, I'd love it.
Yeah, that I didn't realize that was the name of your chapter. I have the book, and I will be tuning in.
Yeah, it's towards the end.
Okay.
But I hope you enjoy it, and please give me feedback after you do read it. Absolutely. I do have one other international experience I could talk about, Glenn.
Oh, please do.
In 2012, I was invited by the U.S. Embassy and the country of Belarus to come and be an expert on domestic violence.
Is that right?
Yes. So they paid for my entire trip there. They hired an interpreter for me.
Oh,
now, Belarus is just to the east of Russia. And it actually used to be part of Russia, but they separated. And they have YWCA organizations there. And Belarus has like 7, they're like the states of the United States, so they have 7 regions. And they had a YWCA in each region. And they have done a lot of work on women's leadership and young women's leadership. And they wanted to start working on responding to domestic violence. Because unfortunately, domestic violence, sexual violence, and all those are a universal problem, right? It's a global phenomenon. So they said, well, you've done a lot of work over there in the U.S., so come over and we want to talk about it. So I was able to go to their national YWCA conference, and the next day they had an international conference where they had people from all the surrounding countries come. And we talked about how we do domestic violence services here and what's different about them. And those people were so wonderful, so warm and inviting, and it was just a joy to be with them. They kept saying to me, I've never met anybody like you from the U.S. Is everyone like you? And I'm like, no. Not everyone's like me. I'm pretty different.
Yes, you are, Debra.
I talk about violence. Not everybody talks about it.
Right, exactly. And that is just so wonderful. What a service you have to offer people who really need it and don't know that it's out there. So, Debra, would you mind giving our listeners a way that they can get in touch with you again? I'm sure there are some people out there that could use your help.
I'd be honored. My email is Debra K. Adams, M.A. @gmail.com. And I spelled Debra the short way. It's Debra, middle initial K, Adams, M.A. @gmail.com. I also have a website that starts the same way. It's www.DebraKAdamsSES.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a separate web page for the book, and that is www.DebraKAdamsTheMissingPiece.com. Okay. And I write a blog, and I do anything I can to get the word out there about, this is something that we need to really start working at the root causes of it if we want to hopefully someday end it. Yeah, that's really important to me.
Yes, that's important to me as well, Debra. And I encourage anyone out there that needs that type of help, please get in touch with Debra. You need that. Well, Debra, it's been so nice having you. My first guest, I've enjoyed our conversation, and I resonated so much with what you've had to say, and I didn't realize it was going to turn out that way, but it did.
It's a nice surprise.
Yeah, a nice surprise, and I thank you so, so very much for being on my show.
My pleasure. Anytime, Gwen.
I hope to have you back again.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We will see you in 2 weeks, right here, Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on What on Earth Are You Doing After 50? Thank you for joining me, and go out there and really rock your second half of life.